favorite engineers on YouTube. This is Mayuko and Jarvis.
Hi.
Hello.
We're doing a collab series today, sort of all about our careers stuff, you know? Yeah, it's gonna be great. You're gonna check out their videos, linked down below in the description. But right now, in my video, we're gonna talk about designers working with developers.
Yes.
Yes, should be good. Sometimes there's some conflict in those areas, you know, it happens.
Yeah, any human relationship has the opportunity for conflict.
Exactly. Do you want to start by telling everyone what type of engineer you are and like, what do you do?
Sure, I'll go first.
Yeah.
So I'm an iOS engineer, so I make iOS apps.
And I'm a full stack web engineer focusing primarily on the back end. So I'm building APIs and systems that power a web application.
Right. Okay, so how do you normally work with designers? It sounds like from your two jobs, the process would be kind of different.
So iOS apps tend to be kind of like considered as front end, so kind of in the same world as like Android apps or even like front end web. So it's really like building what the user sees. So a lot of it is a direct translation between like what the designer designs and turning that into like an app or functional code. So yeah, we work really like heavily with. Really heavily, is that one? Really closely, that's the word. So yeah, we work really closely with designers for that.
And how does the process work? Like, does a designer like do a full pixel perfect mock-up and give it to you and you build it from there and then they do feedback?
Yeah. Typically, like they get to maybe like anywhere between like 50 to like 90% completion. I would say like the more looser and flexible it is, the better, because then there's a lot of opportunity for feedback, especially as like an engineer giving feedback to a designer for a specific design. It's like providing any expertise I have about like how long is this going to take to build? Is this really complicated to build? Like we don't want to spend too much time on something that's like really specific that isn't important to the problem. So yeah, if designers have it like at this good like range, then it makes it really easy for us to work with them and we can make a better product as a result.
Nice. There's a constant dialogue between the engineering team and the designer and product, and that sort of cycle of communication is very important. So oftentimes on the team there are meetings with the designer where we see this like 80% design, and the team is able to weigh in on it in terms of complexity on the engineering side. And just general feedback, as well as like on the design side, they're doing like design reviews, so it's already going through like layers and layers of feedback. And then we give our feedback and are able to iterate towards our solution.
I like that it goes both ways too with the feedback.
Yeah, it's very important because any breakdown in that communication can make people distrustful of like why they're building what they're building. And it can feel on the engineering side like a feature factory where you are just like a code monkey and you have no say in like what's being built. And that's never a situation that you want to be in.
I definitely remember that from past jobs I've had working with developers where things were kind of separate and we'd hand it off to them to build it and they'd build it not exactly like the design. I'd be like, why'd you do this? And they'll be like, oh, I didn't think that was important. And I was like, that's the most important part.
That's a very long feedback cycle. Here's a design, I built the thing, and now we find out if something's wrong. Whereas when you can have like a more piecemeal conversation,
more like
consistent contact, you get much better results.
Exactly.
And I think the healthiest like product teams, because at the end of the day, like product manager, designer, and engineer are all working towards like solving a problem together, and each person is going to like make specific decisions around that. But if you can all align on what's the best solution for that problem, then that's like the best case scenario. And so that involves a lot of like this talking and collaboration and really agreeing and aligning on what that is. And so like having everyone in the room at once to do that is like awesome.
That makes total sense. I'm always asking, well, back when I worked with a front-end developer, now I have to develop my own websites, so that's a whole different story. But I was always asking like, how long is this going to take to build? Like if I design it this way, is that going to really extend the build time? Because it's not that important, but I would kind of like it to look like this.
One of the benefits that comes with engineering and design having a constant communication is those types of discussions the designer can learn more about what's possible, and the engineer can think more about the long term, because if you really want the design to be that way, well, do we as an organization want designs to be more like this in the future? Because in that case we might want to make investments that make those types of problems easier to solve down the line.
I learned a lot from like the almost things that went wrong with working with developers, about pointing out to them when something was going to be like a component, like, hey, I plan on using this a lot, like this style of thing, so build it out like that. Like, I just wasn't aware of pointing that out to start with.
Should we define a component?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, so like in a product or in a design, oftentimes the design is made up of smaller reusable pieces that you can use more than once everywhere. Like you'll notice, like if you go to 2 different pages on Facebook, you'll see a lot of the same design elements. And the designers and the engineers' lives are made easier by having like a library or a system by which they can build these reusable components and use them all over the place.
We'd often find that sometimes, I don't know, depending on which developer I work with, this quote like design component would look different because we hadn't told them that, hey, this is being reused, and they didn't realize that someone else had already built it on another page.
Sometimes I always have to like think, like when there is a design system, I'm like, oh, like the way that designers build their mocks is really similar to how we build code. Because if you have these reusable components and you're just like using them in different places and tweaking them a little bit, then like, you know, engineers are going to create classes that are reusable. Designers are going to use symbols that are like reusable, right? So the process is like pretty similar, and so when engineers and designers can jive like that, it's like you get so much stuff done and it feels so good.
Can you think of any situations where you've had something like that, working with a designer, something's gone wrong and what you learned from it? Like, how can we as designers who are watching this, because it's mostly designers who watch my channel, how can they learn from this?
I feel like always communicating kind of like what is going into the thinking of a design, I think is really important. As engineers, like we see everything as kind of like a whole thing, so we don't understand the specific like decisions that were made, like why is this button rounded, or like why is this there, why is this there. But like by understanding that, we can also prioritize like what's the most important part of this mock from a designer that we should prioritize. So that also helps us to be like, okay, if this is really expensive to create, but it's a really core part of the design, then we really should spend the time to do it. Or if it's like, okay, this is a really expensive thing to do, but it's not that important, then we can have conversations to decide what to do, basically. But I think that constant communication of just like open, like I guess that constant open and honest communication is really important. And really it's just understanding like where each other is at, and it's almost an exercise of empathy.
And I think it's really important to try. I think I've had some experiences where someone on the design side wasn't trying to understand, or like maybe that communication channel hadn't been built, and it was more of like throwing it over the fence. But when you, on either side, engineer or designer, try to understand the systems that are at play, everyone's job is easier. But if you kind of are only zoned into your world and not like looking, like your engineers are your friends, like you're all working together to the same goal, so talking to one another, not being afraid, I think is like the best thing. And when that doesn't happen, I've just seen it go wrong.
That makes sense.
I
mean, it sounds pretty simple, right? Communication. For some reason, it is difficult.
It's tough. It's tough. There's a lot of competing interests. It's always hard to know, like too much communication can be a thing, and you never want to put up, arbitrary barriers and red tape. It makes everybody like feel like it's harder to get their work done. So striking that balance is like why it's like a simple concept but very difficult in practice.
Especially because each person has their individual expectations, right? And each person has a really unique way of doing that. So every time there's a new designer, a new engineer, you have to like feel that out a little bit.
And like build the relationship again as well.
Exactly. You have to develop that trust too. And that stuff just takes time to do, and you just have to work at it really well.
So on that, do you think that designers should learn to code? This is the question that the internet asks.
This is a good one.
Short
answer, why not? I don't think it's I also think that engineers should learn like fundamental aspects of design.
That was gonna be my next question.
So it kind of goes back to like this communication and like the reciprocity like necessary, and the empathy that like Mayuko is talking about. It's so easy to like imagine what engineers do as this like wild black box when there's a lot of complexity there, but there is also a lot of simplicity, and it takes you could get 80% of the benefit of understanding how engineering systems work with like 20% of the effort. And that's like a really valuable thing to do, because it's going to just make your life easier. And I say the same thing about engineers with design, because I mean, have you seen an engineer? You can always tell when an engineer is designing something, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with that because like that empathy for going back and forth is really important.
Mm-hmm.
But if you build that up, like if engineers have the skills to design and designers have the skills to code, or not even like they just understand how that works, then there maybe doesn't even have to be as much communication of like, hey, I like really highly prioritize this because this is like a core design thing that just needs to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like buttons should be easy to identify and like they shouldn't be this wild color where text is hard to read. Like those are things that are, if you understand those things, then you don't even have to like consult your designer for every single thing.
Right.
And I think that also goes the same way from a designer's perspective too. Like there's certain like constraints that engineers are trying to work with, and so understanding at least the shape of those constraints can make making decisions together a lot easier.
And that helps like the over communication problem, where you can have more meaningful communication if you dip your foot in the other person's pool. There was a metaphor there.
It means that you don't have to explain the basics to them, right? Because you already get each other on a fundamental level.
Yeah, and you don't resent each other for like, oh, they keep asking me these basic questions.
Yeah.
If only they had, you know,
taken 2 seconds.
Taken 2 seconds or spent a day walking in my shoes. I'm mixing lots of metaphors.
That's good. I think it's good that, I don't know, thank you for being here to share this like view of things.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's important for designers and developers to talk, and because we're both building the same thing at the end of the day.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for watching, everyone. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Do you want to quickly say what videos we're doing on each of your channels so that people can then go and click the cards and watch them?
Yeah, so on my channel we're talking about success. How do we define it? How do we think about it? It'll be a good time.
Yeah.
And on my channel we're talking about failure. So that a nice yin and yang we've got going on there.
Thank you for watching. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you guys too.
Yeah. Bye.